to my kitchen. Today we're going to make my all-time favorite, homemade pizza from scratch. We're going to make the dough, we're going to make the sauce, we're going to put the toppings on and bake it, but one thing at a time. So we're going to get started with the dough. And I got all my ingredients laid out here. Our main ingredient is all-purpose flour. So we've got 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. So we're going to go ahead and add that to the mixing bowl. I also have some flour set aside here. That's going to be for when we knead the dough. We're going to need some flour for that. Besides that, we've got 1 teaspoon of sugar. We've got 1 teaspoon of salt. We've got 1 packet of yeast, but we're going to hold off on putting that in, and I'll tell you why. We're going to go ahead and put the dough hook onto the mixer. And we're going to go ahead and just incorporate these dry ingredients. And I'll tell you why, because yeast does not like salt. Salt kills yeast. And so we don't want it to come in direct contact. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix that up a little bit and let that flour and salt disperse throughout. That way it's not such a shock to the yeast when we put it in there. We also are going to have approximately 3/4 to 1 cup of hot water, and it's actually between 110 degrees and 120 degrees for instant yeast is about right. And I already have that set up here, and it's like bath water warm, you know. So I'm going to go ahead, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and add my yeast. And then we're going to start to gradually, we're going to go ahead and add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And of course, it's extra virgin, first cold pressed olive oil. So let that go a little bit in with the flour mix. And I'm going to gradually start to add my water in. And you want that to start to get around that dough hook, and you want it to go ahead and start picking up all the flour that's on the outside. I think you probably can see that. So we're going to go ahead and add a little bit more. And we're probably going to need, in some cases, it depends on actually the humidity in your home. Whether you're going to have to add more flour, you're going to have to add more water. Because sometimes the dough will be too dry or too wet. So it looks like I'm going to have to go ahead and add pretty much the rest of my cup. At 8 to 10 minutes, and that's you'll know the texture when you get there, and it's starting to look pretty good. It's starting to pull everything off the sides of the bowl. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop it, and I'm going to pull it off the dough hook, and I can feel it right now that it's a tad on the dry side, but it's not bad. We're going to go ahead and kick it back on. And I'm probably going to just add a little more water. And I'm talking a little bit, teaspoon. So now, I don't know if you can see it, but the mixing bowl itself no longer has any dough stuck on the sides or flour stuck on the side. And we're going to, here's where it gets, it starts to wrap itself around that dough hook, and we're looking pretty good here. So we're going to let this go for about, like I say, about 8 minutes. And okay, so it's been about 8 minutes or so, and it's actually looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and shut it off and take a look. And the dough is nice and smooth, and that's what we're looking for. And I'm going to go ahead and drop this down. And it comes out without sticking. So we're going to go ahead and flour our surface. We're going to take our dough ball. We're going to do a little bit of hand kneading. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking and I'm turning up on end and folding in. And I'm going to go that direction. And I'm going to go in this direction. Getting that flour in there as well. The mixer actually did a pretty good job of kneading this. I can feel the texture of it. It's very good. Okay. So then what we need to do is we need to form a ball. And what I'm doing is I'm just turning it and pulling it in on itself. And you can see the bottom of it. Get a nice smooth texture. And what I'm going to do is put it down, and I like to pinch this closed. And it's not imperative, because now what we have to do is we have to let this dough, it's called proofing it, it's letting it rise. When you're making bread, sometimes you have 2 rises. With pizza, we use 1 rise. And what we're going to need is a nice large bowl, and you want to either grease it with olive oil straight from the bottle and take a brush. I found it's pretty easy to use this spray olive oil. A lot easier actually. So I've gone that direction. So you want to get your dough ball down in there, and you want to toss it around a little bit and get some of that oil on the outside as well. Let me give it a little shot there. And then we're going to cover this. You can cover it 2 ways. You can cover it with plastic wrap or a wet towel. I drift towards the old school way of a wet towel. So I've taken a tea towel and I've wet it with warm water. And I'm going to drape it over top of the bowl like this. And then you want to put it somewhere where it's not going to get cold, like the closed area is very good. And I always put it in the oven. Of course, the oven is not on. It's just maybe the light's on in there, but that keeps the air from moving around it. A microwave works quite well for that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven. It actually has to sit for about 1 hour to 1.5 hours. So when I come back over here, we're going to go ahead and start on our sauce. So starting with our ingredients for our homemade sauce. We've got 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes, a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of sugar, 1 whole teaspoon of dried basil, 1/2 teaspoon of oregano, 1 whole clove of garlic minced, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and just a pinch of crushed red pepper, and that is optional. I like everything to be a little spicy. So now that we got our dough set aside to rise, we're going to take that time and go ahead and make our sauce. First step is we take a small saucepan and we're going to add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And I usually just kind of cover the whole bottom of the pot. And that's usually good. I'm going to put the stovetop on like a medium. We have to let that heat up. And what we're going to do is we're going to saute our garlic. It's very much like when I make my homemade spaghetti sauce, but it just gets that garlic infused into the oil before we add our tomato sauce to it. All right, so we're starting to get, our garlic is starting to saute in the oil. Like I said, we don't want this to burn, so you got to watch your heat. And if you think it's going to get close to burning, it's time to go ahead. You'll be able to smell that garlic just the aroma of it just coming up out of that oil, because it's just getting infused with it at this point. So I'm just kind of keeping it moving so it doesn't burn that garlic, it doesn't burn. And there's no science to this, you just want to saute it for a short time. It's going to cook more in the sauce, so I'm going to go ahead, at this point I'm going to add my tomato sauce. And that is our 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes. And we're going to add our 6 ounces of tomato paste. And we can add our dry ingredients. We've got our salt, we've got our sugar, our dried basil, our oregano, black pepper, and some crushed red pepper. And now we want to go ahead and get that all mixed in. What we're going to do is bring this to a boil, and it will thin out that tomato paste. Everything's cold in there now. And then we're going to reduce it to a simmer, and it's going to cook for a good half hour. So that's good timing while you are waiting on your dough. And certainly we're not going to stick around while this simmers and we're waiting on our dough. So it's been over an hour now. My dough has been proofing or rising. I did relocate it and I got my oven already preheated. Now the fun part, we get to go ahead and unveil. Now the dough, you can see, has grown probably double in size. And so what you want to do is you want to punch that down a little bit. And I want to go ahead and I want to sprinkle a little bit of flour on the counter. And I also use a little bit of cornmeal. And you could use semolina flour too, but cornmeal is what I got. And I like it. It kind of makes a little more crunchy on the crust. So we're going to take the dough at this point, get it out on the counter. Now there's a couple ways we can go about this. You know, the old school way is, well, you're going to just go ahead and start pressing it out into the shape that you need it. You can use a rolling pin if you feel that you need to. And you could stretch it with your hands. The dough is pretty durable. So I'm going to just go ahead and start by spreading it out. Now the dough, this recipe here makes 1 16-inch pizza, which is, I guess, by the standards, an extra large. So I'm flipping it. Probably at about a 12-inch, and occasionally you're going to want to dust it with a little more flour. Now what I do is I also bring it up on my hands and stretch it and flip. Back in the day, I could really move this dough around. Right out of school, I went to college in South Florida, and my first job down there was working in a pizzeria and on the beach, and I was the young guy that was always trying to get the girls, and we liked the pizza guy. I don't know, it worked. There was a nightclub right up the street. So we want to stretch this till we get it to that 16 inches. Like I say, it's pretty durable. Now, a lot of people like to use the pizza stone in the oven. I don't have that. What I've been using, and I've had great success with, is this perforated pizza pan. One that allows that the heat get up and cook the bottom of it really well, and it holds the shape. It's easy to manage. No excuses. That's just what I use, you know. So at this point, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get it into our And this makes a thin crust pizza. You could always go with more flour in the recipe, maybe 3 cups, and you're going to end up with a little bit of a thicker. But I like this. This is basically your New York style. Now our sauce is done. I don't know if you can see this, but it is very thick, very nice. I mean, I tasted it. I mean, this is my favorite sauce that I make. I've been making it a long time. And you won't be sorry. You won't be sorry with the taste of the dough either. And then as far as toppings, you know, everybody has their preferences there. So let's go ahead and get started with this. I always use a ladle, a nice sized ladle. And you start with the middle, and you kind of work your way in a circular motion, bringing that sauce out. So I've already selected my toppings for today. I picked pepperoni and red hot cherry pepper sliced. So from there, what we're going to do is I always take and I put a little fresh Parmesan cheese. Of course, mozzarella. This is a low moisture part skim mozzarella. And I start in the center and work my way out as well. And this is what I learned as a young guy in the pizzeria. I always take a little oregano and gently sprinkle the top of the cheese with that. And we put oregano in the sauce as well, so we like that here. I'm going to go ahead and add my toppings. Pretty good. Actually kind of hungry. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take a little break. I'm going to stick this in the oven. When it's ready, you'll be able to take a look at it, and I'll cut it up, get a look at the bottom, get to see what the crust is like, and go from there. All right, be right back. Okay, so it only took about 7 minutes. Like I said, it varies, but I think it looks pretty wonderful. So we're gonna slide it off of this pan onto the counter, and that way we can take a better look at it here. So I don't know if you could see the crust on the bottom, nice and golden brown. Our cheese was just starting to bubble. It is near perfection. I'm starting to really drool over this. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it. And we'll take a look at how a slice looks here. It is extremely hot, but it is quite manageable. The crust is, as far as I'm concerned, perfect. So thank you very much for spending the time with me. I know I'm going to enjoy this, and you enjoy the rest of your day. See you next time.